I think probably today, the best thing to do is to take a short step into the Jewish world of Lashon Hara, of negative speech. Now, negative speech, when we say the word Lashon Hara, we mean specifically this. We mean that there is a speaker who's speaking to a listener about a third person. We'll call them the subject or the victim. Okay? I'm speaking to you about somebody else. There are other Jewish laws about speech. One would be called Ona'at Dvarim. Ona'at Dvarim is where I am cruel with my words directly to you. Sometimes we can have one conversation that is both Lashon Hara, where I'm speaking badly about somebody to somebody else, and Ona'at Dvarim, where I'm speaking badly directly to somebody. Because with Ona'at Dvarim, I could be coming along to you and saying not nice things directly to you. You are horrible, you are stupid, you are ugly, whatever it happens to be. But somebody else can hear me saying those words. So it's cruelty with words directed to you. That's Ona'at Dvarim in Hebrew. And it's negative speech to the other person about you because they're hearing what I'm saying about you to you. So sometimes you can have a situation where there is a buildup of, should we call them sins, bad behaviors, in just one conversation. One conversation can lead to a whole pile of problems. And this is why the great Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, who we know as the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim means desires life. And it's based on a famous verse in Psalms, which I'm sure many of you know, which is, who is the one who desires life? King David asks. And then he says a few things. And then he says, the one who guards his tongue from evil. Okay? And therefore, this rabbi, when he wrote his famous book about the Jewish laws of negative speech, called it Chafetz Chaim, desires life. You want life? You want a good life, both in this world and, please God, in the next? One of the biggest secrets is controlling your mouth. One of the biggest secrets. People love people who can keep their secrets, who they know that they can trust not to backstab them when they've left the room. Those are the people who are beloved among us. You may have friends who you enjoy listening to the gossip they tell you about others, but unfortunately, there's one thing you can be sure. When you leave the room, they're going to say something bad about you to whoever's remaining, because it's a habit that they have. It's just what they are. The people who are really beloved among people are people who can control their mouth, who speak nicely, give encouraging words, build worlds by giving encouraging words, and speak nicely about people and keep people's secrets. Unless there's, of course, danger. There are rules when it comes to keeping secrets. If there's a danger, you're allowed to reveal a secret. But otherwise, you're not allowed to reveal somebody's secret. So that's in this world. You desire good life in this world, learn how to use your mouth in the correct way. But also, we are told that a massive, massive gateway to entering heaven, the next world, the goodness of the next world, is learning how to control our mouth. So in this book that he calls Desires Life, he tells us that the source, the Torah source, the biblical source for this prohibition is Vayikra chapter 19, verse 16. That is Leviticus chapter 19, verse 16. And there it says, Lo telech rachil ba'amecha, do not go as a gossiper among your people. Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, do not stand by while your fellow's blood is spilt. Ani Hashem, I am God. Now there are three sections to that verse. And for those of you who have spent some time studying the Torah, you will sometimes see that there are a few different parts to a verse that seem to have no obvious connection. In this case, it is, don't go as a gossiper among your people. Don't stand by while somebody's blood is spilled or somebody is harmed. I am Hashem, I am God. What is the connection of those three things? Well, first of all, let's understand each one separately. The first one is, don't go around speaking badly about somebody else. The second section is, probably the best way I can explain it is, imagine that you've had a really, really, really hard few months and you want to go on holiday. So you go, you find a quiet beach, empty beach, beautiful sand, sun. You hear the waves rushing up on the sand on the beach, and you're sitting there quietly, there's nobody there, when suddenly you hear, help, help, and you look out to the sea and you see somebody's drowning there, and you go, shh, shh, I'm on holiday, shh, and he goes, help, help, and you go, shh, and eventually when he sinks, when he drowns, you go, that's better. We're not allowed to do that. That's called standing idly by while our fellow's blood is spilt. Oh, you'll tell me, but I didn't do anything. Yeah, that's the point. You were supposed to do something, you didn't do something. What's the connection between the first section, don't be a gossiper, and the second section, don't stand by doing nothing when somebody's harmed? Well, there's two connections. The first connection is this. People think my words are nothing. What am I doing? I'm just speaking. It's just air. I'm not doing anything. Therefore, the verse is telling you, do you know what? Even when you literally do nothing, but somebody gets harmed, that's terrible. So here, when you did slightly more than nothing, when you spoke, of course that's terrible. That's one connection between those two parts of the verse. The other connection, which Maimonides points out, and it's very, very important, and that is, don't go as a gossiper among your people, but there are times where your silence enables harm. And although there are rules of not speaking badly about people, there are also rules of when you must speak up for the protection of a person or the protection of society. And perhaps at some future time we can discuss that. That's not going to be the topic of today. Maybe in a couple of classes' time, we can look at when, according to Jewish law, not only can you speak up, but you must speak up for the good of a person or society. But let's wind back. The third part of it is, I am God. Now, there is a famous commentary who explains the following. He says, whenever you see I am God in a verse, it means I am God who knows exactly what's going on. It's normally appears in a verse where the instructions are things that are going on in your own mind. Or perhaps you could say, oh, but I couldn't have done anything. Oh, no, it was beyond me. Or, no, I meant well. So the verse ends, no. I am God, and I know everything. I know what's going on in your mind. I know whether you could have jumped into the water then and saved the guy, or you couldn't have. Oh, you think you're coming along and you're saying some gossip, but you're saying, oh, but no, but there's a constructive purpose here. I'm trying to help society. I am God. I know exactly what's going on in your mind. I know whether this is self-serving, whether it's revenge and anger, or whether actually something positive is coming out of it. So that's the verse. That's the introduction. Don't go as a gossiper among your people. As I delved more into this topic, I found that there are two distinct types of negative speech, of Lashon Hara. The first type is damaging Lashon Hara, where I say something that causes somebody either physical harm, financial loss, or emotional suffering. I say something about somebody to somebody else, because that's called Lashon Hara, and it causes harm, physical harm, financial loss, or emotional suffering. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about physical harm. Let's say, I don't know, I'm standing on a street corner, okay? Tall buildings, I can see down both roads like this, okay? As I'm looking down that road there, I see somebody running for their life, and behind them, a vicious-looking guy with a knife going, chasing after them, okay? That's the situation. I can see all of this happening. As I'm watching, the pursued, the person running for their life, runs around the corner, sees a trash can there, jumps into this garbage can, and puts the lid on. And a moment later, the pursuer with the knife runs around the corner and says, "Where is he?" Turns to you, you're standing there. "Where is he?" What do you reply? I mean, you could say, "He went that way, the other way," right? Or, "I don't know," or "Who? What?" As if you've got no idea what's happening. But if you say, "He's in the trash can," that is called damaging Lashon Hara. You are speaking about somebody to somebody else, and we know it's going to cause harm, physical harm. Now, what's interesting about this case that I just said is that there is nothing derogatory about it. I have not put the person down in any way. The person who's in the trash can, I haven't said anything not nice about them. All I've said is something that will end up causing them harm. That is called Lashon Hara. That's one type of Lashon Hara. What would financial be? Let's say a friend of mine has found an apartment at a really cheap price. And I tell you that a friend of mine has found an apartment. They've got a verbal agreement, a worded agreement, but they have not yet signed on the dotted line. And one of you people pulls out your phone and you immediately call your broker and you buy out that apartment at a slightly higher price before my friend can actually sign. Now, we do believe in a free market. Free market is okay. But once a person is at the stage where they're literally about to buy the place, they've got a worded agreement and they're just going through the final forms. If I reveal that in public, and then somebody takes that information and buys the thing instead of them, essentially what I've done is I've caused them financial loss. I've spoken about them to somebody else, and that's caused financial loss. That's not allowed. And do you know what? It probably also caused emotional suffering, because now my friend who's invested money in investigating that property has now lost that money, and now emotionally has to deal with, having that loss and dealing with finding something else. All of that is called Lashon Hara. Now, traditionally, people are not aware of this. People are aware of the put downs, the insults. They're not aware that Lashon Hara also includes comments about somebody, even if they are not derogatory. Derogatory means degrading, putting the person down. Even if they're not putting the person down in any way, but they're causing financial loss, physical harm, or emotional suffering, that is not allowed. So that's one type of Lashon Hara. The other type of Lashon Hara, negative speech, is something that's more well-known. That's the put-down comments, like, she is ugly, she is stupid, she does this thing wrong, she does that thing wrong. Those are called derogatory comments. Those are comments that put somebody down. They lower them. That's also not allowed. And we're going to see in a future class, well, it depends on how much time we have today, but probably in a future class, that there's really two different types of derogatory comments. But we'll talk about that at another time. The thing that really, really shocked me is what Maimonides, the great sage Maimonides, says, and he's quoted by Rabbi Kagan, the person who wrote this book, the Chafetz Chaim, Desires Life. And that is that these two types of negative speech, of Lashon Hara, are essentially independent of each other. Meaning, it's like a Venn diagram. We've done Venn diagrams, okay? One circle is damaging, one circle is derogatory. Most of the time, if I say something not nice about somebody, it will also cause harm, okay? And therefore, a lot of the time when I say Lashon Hara, it is both damaging, both harmful, and derogatory. But what Maimonides points out, and he brings sources to demonstrate this, is that it is called Lashon Hara and it is prohibited, even if it is just damaging, even and not derogatory, like the examples I gave. I didn't put anybody down by saying they're hiding in the trash can or by saying they're about to buy an apartment. There's nothing lowly about buying an apartment. I didn't put anybody down. But it's still called Lashon Hara and it's still prohibited because I cause them harm by speaking about them. And the other way around, if it's just derogatory and not damaging, that is also called Lashon Hara, and it is not allowed. Now, for me, I could not get my head around this. This didn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you think about it, imagine one of you was an angel. You can polish your halo. And at the end of the class today, I asked one of you to remain, but you're an angel. And I said to you, you know that other person on our Zoom class that we just had, that there's something wrong with that person, right? I mean, you know, and start making not nice comments. But the person I'm speaking to is an angel, right? And they're not going to accept it in their mind. They're just going to let it wash it over. They're probably going to say, oh, it's that Menachem Salasnik. You know, he's got a big mouth, whatever, you know. He needs to work on himself, but you're not gonna take it into your heart. You're never gonna tell the person who I spoke badly about what I said, because you know it's gonna make them upset. And you're not gonna treat them any differently. So what's wrong with that? Why can't I speak badly about people? Do you know what? I'm desperate. I love speaking badly about people. It's all I used to do in my lunch break. Whenever I was hanging around with people, that's all I used to do, right? That's what I need. So what's wrong with this? Why can't I just choose? I'll choose a good listener, right? I'll find a good listener who I can mouth off whatever I want about somebody. And I'll guarantee that way that the person I'm speaking about will never be harmed. What's wrong with that? And yet, the Chafetz Chaim, the author of this book, explains that that's also not allowed. And I'm asking, what's wrong with it? Or I'll give you another example if you don't like that example. Let's imagine, I don't know, let's choose, what's her name? Wonder Woman. She's a Jewish actress. What's her name? Gal Gadot. Right? I don't know if you've come across this actress. She's a Jewish actress. Let's say I wanted to say something not nice about her to you. No, she's a multi-billionaire, I'm sure, right? She's doing this, Wonder Woman, Cleopatra, whatever her latest ventures are. Right? She's famous. She's what? Do you really think that what I say about her to you guys is ever gonna, she's never gonna hear about it, she's never gonna affect her? What's the big deal? Why can't I speak badly about the stars? Nothing bad is gonna happen to them. And I find this really difficult to get my head around until I came across a passage in a wonderful Jewish book, which is called Gates of Repentance. It was written by a famous rabbi about 800 years ago. His name was Rabbi Jonah. He lived in a place called Gironde, which I think is somewhere near the Spain-France border. In fact, there is a story as to how he wrote this book, which is why this rabbi is my hero. It's interesting. People sometimes say, who would you like to meet? Yeah, so if you could choose anybody throughout history, who would you like to meet? It's interesting that my hero would be 800 years old. I'll tell you why he's my hero. Because there is a famous story about this Rabbi Yonah. Back then, which was shortly after Maimonides. I'm sure you all heard of Maimonides. They were a great sage. Some of what Maimonides wrote was considered to be controversial by some sectors of the Jewish community. And one of the people who spoke the strongest against some of Maimonides' works was this Rabbi Jonah of Gironde. At some point, exactly how it happened isn't clear, but one of his students misunderstood something he said and decided that they were going to take practical action. This student approached the Christian authorities in the French Empire and told them that Maimonides has been writing stuff against Jesus. Now, that was true. Maimonides clearly says his opinion, it's not everybody's opinion, but his opinion is that having a trinity, a three-headed Godhead, or partnership, if you'd like to call it that, he considered that to be idol worship. He says it very, very clearly. So the Christian authorities started investigating his books, and yes, they found where he clearly says something like that about Jesus. The Christian authorities decided that they would gather up every single possible volume of Maimonides' books across the French Empire. They took this massive pile of books to the courtyard outside the Notre Dame Cathedral, and they burnt them there. Now, perhaps that could have been the end of the story. But the Christian authorities were so excited by the book burning that they'd just done that they said, well, it's interesting because Maimonides quotes from this book called the Talmud, the many-volumed book called the Talmud that makes up the written down version of our oral law, because we got a written law and an oral explanation. And eventually that was written down. He keeps on quoting this Talmud. Let's have a look at that. Maybe that's also against our religion. And yes, as they waded through the Talmud, they found many occasions where it was against Christianity. So the Christian authorities went to the king at the time. The king was one of the Louis. Can't remember. He's the one that, if any of you are from Missouri, it's the one that St. Louis is named after. This particular king was known. The reason he was made a saint was because he fought the battle for Christianity very, very well, including killing many people who didn't agree with him. They went to this Louis and they said, this is what the Talmud says, these are what the Jews all study. The king ordered a debate between one of his leading bishops and whoever the Jews wanted to put forward as one of their rabbis. We actually have a recording of that debate. The Jew did not lose, which is why the Jewish people in France at that time were not massacred. However, the king said, nevertheless, even though you didn't lose the debate, we cannot have books like this in our empire. And he ordered that every single volume of Talmud from across the French Empire should be gathered and burnt. And the recording we have of this story says 24,000 truckloads of Talmudic volumes of Jewish holy books were gathered. They were taken to the courtyard outside the Notre Dame Cathedral, placed on top of the ashes of Maimonides' books that were still there, and burnt. It was almost the end of the Jewish community in France, because without our books, we are nothing. At that point, Rabbi Jonah did something truly heroic. This is our definition of heroism. You want to know what the definition of heroism is? Rabbi Jonah stood up publicly and he said, I was wrong. It is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that on the same place where Maimonides' books were burnt, our holiest books have been burnt. God runs the world. There's no such thing as a coincidence. He then decided to dedicate his life to repairing the damage that he did. He wrote this book called Gates of Repentance. And in the third gate, in the third chapter section of the book, he deals specifically with negative speech and the damage it can cause. And then he decided that he was going to travel to Israel. Maimonides died in Egypt. He was buried there. And then not too long afterwards, he was moved from his burial place in Egypt to Tiberias. You can actually go, if you go to Tiberias, you can go and visit his grave. Rabbi Jonah dedicated the rest of his life to traveling. At that time, it was very, very difficult. Every single Jewish community that he stopped off on the way, he wanted to go to the grave to apologize at the grave. Every single community that he stopped off on the way, he asked the local rabbi, can I speak to the community? Now, they'd heard that Rabbi Jonah was this fiery speaker. They were looking forward to some fiery, let's. And Rabbi Jonah got up, slapped his hand on the pulpit and said, I was wrong. He actually never got to Israel. He died on the way. This is our definition of a hero. You know, I say this with love and compassion. If you look at other religions, you will notice that their greatest people cannot be challenged. You cannot say anything bad about their great people. And yet our book, if you've read our book, every single one of our great people is criticized. Have you read our book? I mean, wade through, these are my ancestors. It's horrifying sometimes. And the reason is, it's very, very simple. We do not believe that we are angels. We do not believe that we have been put on this world to be perfect. We believe that we have been put on this world to try and achieve, to try and improve. And if we fall, we will pick ourselves up and try again. And we will never be held down by our previous failures. This is why Rabbi Jonah is my hero. Because a person who can dedicate the rest of his life to trying to repair the negative speech that he said in the past, you can see why somebody like that would be my hero. I hope I'm doing him proud. In this book, in Rabbi Jonah's book, Gates of Repentance, he says this: there are two problems with the person who speaks badly about somebody else. Number one, the damage and embarrassment he causes his fellow. And number two, his very choosing to see the negative in somebody else and his enjoyment at their downfall. What Rabbi Jonah means is this: when you speak badly about somebody else, you will sometimes cause that person harm and embarrassment. But you know what? You will always harm yourself. What does it say about you? That you spend your time focusing on the negative in somebody else? What does it say about you that you get your kicks and your entertainment and enjoyment from seeing somebody else fall? And what are you doing to yourself as you reinforce those negative behaviors? You know, nowadays, there is a term that people use. I'm going to use it. I don't mean it in the same way as they use it. But there are three types of mitzvot in the Torah. There are three types of Torah commandments. One is between us and our Creator. One is between us and our fellow person. And one is between us and ourselves. God tells us, don't self-harm. Now, again, I don't mean self-harm the way it is used medically nowadays. People who are self-harming, it's normally because of trauma. They need compassion and support as they go through whatever trauma therapy they need, okay? But I mean, in general, God tells us, I gave you a body and I gave you a soul. And now it's your responsibility to look after them. Look after them. Be healthy, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. This is your responsibility. And therefore, what Rabbi Jonah is telling us is, you may sometimes harm somebody else when you speak badly about them, but you will always harm yourself. And then he says, if you've read my book, I say this in the introduction, because for me, this is the line that changed my life. He says, flies always rest on dirty places. And he's giving a parable. You know, if you walk down the pavement, the sidewalk, and you see somebody's dog has fouled on the sidewalk, yeah, and the owner didn't clean it up. What will you always see resting? Resting. You will always see flies resting on that pile of filth. And what Rabbi Jonah is saying in parable form is this: there are people who are like flies. They spend their life living in other people's dirt. But do you know what happens if you spend your life living in other people's dirt? You cannot spend your life living in other people's dirt and not become dirty yourself. You climb in somebody else's trash. You dig the dirt on somebody else. It's going to make you filthy. My learning partner said to me, it's fascinating what Rabbi Jonah says about a fly, because there's another insect that's the direct opposite to a fly. And that is a bee, because what bees do is they go searching for the best possible pollen they can find. And then they take it home and they work on it until they change it into something even sweeter. This is our choice in life. We can be a fly, we can dig the dirt on other people, make ourselves filthy at the same time, reinforce the negative, mean-spirited feelings inside ourselves towards other people, and continue to harm ourselves. Or we can be bees. We can search out for the goodness in other people and then take it home and work on it. I want to give you an example of what I mean by taking it home and work on it, okay? If I'm walking down the road, okay, and I see, I don't know what it's like in the countries you come from, but if I'm walking down the road and I see a bus, and the bus is at the bus stop, and then I see somebody running for the bus, where I'm from, I know the guy's not going to get the bus. The bus is just going to drive off, okay? But on this one occasion, I'm watching, and the bus driver's looking in the side mirror. He sees the bus and he waits, and the guy gets on the bus. And I say, wow, this bus driver is a righteous person. What I've just done is I've picked up some pollen. That's great already. And I could forget about it now and never think about it again. Or I could take it home and work on it. Let me show you what that looks like. I could go home, I could think to myself, do you know what? It must be tough being a bus driver. They probably have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning so they have enough time to get ready and get to their to the terminal in time for their first drive. They probably have people shouting at them all day, people ignoring them, treating them with disrespect. They probably have a supervisor checking that they get back to the final stop on time. And despite all that, despite being tired and shouted at and ignored and being watched over, this person cared enough to look and wait. You just turn that into honey. I set myself a challenge. Every single day, I wrote down one positive thing about one person I knew. Different person every day. I started with people who I liked because that's easiest. There weren't many people that I liked, to be honest. So when I ran out of people that I liked, I started again and found something else nice in people who I liked. Different person every day, different thing. I did that for 2 months. After 2 months of that, I felt ready to move on to people who I neither disliked or liked, people I felt neutral about or hardly knew. And again, one positive thing every day, not just thinking it. The Kabbalists say that in the same way as God thought, spoke, and then the world was created, that if we want to make a change, if it remains in the realm of thought, nothing changes. It has to be brought down into the world. That's why I wrote it down. Every single day I wrote one thing down. The neutral people, I often didn't know, so it was often something external, but that's okay. That's fine. Better than nothing. After 2 months of that, so 4 months in total, I felt ready to move on to the people who I really didn't like, the people who wound me up and annoyed me all the time. Because even them have some goodness in there. Perhaps there are some exceptions. We could possibly think of some exceptions. But most people are neither completely good or completely bad. And you should be able to find some good in even those people who wind you up and annoy you. Yeah, you know exactly who I'm talking about right now. Don't start with them. That's too difficult. Work up to it. But when you've worked up to it, I then did them for 2 months. And I want you to know, after 6 months, my life had changed. I was happier. Wherever I went, I was surrounded by nice people. Actually, the people hadn't changed. It was just me. And now, do you know what? I'll come on a screen like this. I'll see people I've never met before. I'm looking at your faces. And automatically, my brain goes to something positive. A smile. Again, it's going to be something external because I don't know you. If I got to know you, I'd find something inside of you as well to love. Because that's the way I've trained my brain. This is my introduction. My introduction to my journey and what I hope you will perhaps take on for yourself. It will not only make the world around you good, happier. It will not only, because the deep Kabbalistic sources say that when we control our mouth, it protects the people that we love more than anything. Our people need more protection than ever. If you're following our news, then you know it. May everything that I've been speaking about today be a merit for the more than 50 orphans who were made orphans this week among the Jewish Israeli community, to give them the support they need to be able to build a good life for themselves. Controlling our mouth helps the people around us, but more than anything, it helps ourselves.